Hello, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Reading Little Blue Books Out Loud While Stoned. Today we're going to start a new book. It's called Evolution Made Plain, and it is Little Blue Book number 467, and it is written by John Mason, and it doesn't have a copyright date. So we'll get into it here in a second. Alrighty, Evolution Made Plain, page 1. The time has come when scientific truth must cease to be the property of the few, when it must be woven into the common life of the world. Agassiz. Read not to contradict and confute, nor to believe and take for granted, but to weigh and consider. Bacon. The man who will not investigate both sides of a question is dishonest. Abraham Lincoln. Intolerance is the product of an ignorant, primitive mind. We should tolerate anything of an intellectual nature except intolerance. Freedom of opinion is the root, flower, and fruit of liberty, its very essence. Anonymous. What evolution is and is not. First chapter. Addison said, "The real substance of a bulky volume can be condensed into a small pamphlet, and it is believed that the fundamental principles of a great scientific discovery like evolution can be outlined in a few pages, and in a way so plain and in words so simple that anyone who is at all interested can get a fairly good understanding of its scope. With this idea in mind, an attempt is here made to explain evolution, to tell what some of its laws and how they work, and to present briefly some of the evidences that support the doctrine. Contrary to popular belief, evolution is not confined to the origin of man, but it explains how all living things have become as we now see them, and how and why the most of them are being changed. It teaches that all living species of plants and animals, including man, also the thousands of extinct species which have left their fossil records in stratified rocks, have been developed from a few small and simple forms. Probably one, and that a mere cell, and it shows, too, that this has been done by the operation of natural laws, the same laws we see in operation today. Evolution does not teach that every living thing is day by day in every way growing better and better. On the contrary, it shows that many species deteriorate, are driven to the wall and become extinct, while only the best fitted survive. For instance, of the 25 orders of reptiles in the Jurassic period, known to the geologists by their fossils, only 5 have come down to our times. But out of the reptilian order, then the highest forms of living things, have come the superior orders of later times, birds and mammals, and this is evolution. We sometimes hear the statement that scientists are not in agreement in regard to evolution. The point of disagreement is in respect to the part played by natural selection in development of species, and not as to whether or not evolution is a fact. The discussion is in regard to the how of the fact, and not the fact itself. No great scientist since Agassiz, who died in 1873, has opposed evolution. Neither does evolution teach that one species may develop into another, as that the goat may develop into the deer, or that the ape may evolve into man. For one species to become another existing species, it would have to take the backtrack to the point where the two species began to diverge and travel the other route, which of course would be impossible. This may help in getting the idea. The larger divisions and groups of animals, fishes, reptiles, mammals, etc., may be compared to the main or primary branches of a tree, families and orders, as the deer, the cat, and the dog, to the secondary branches growing from the primary ones, and the species to the further divisions of the secondary branches. Now we can see that one species can no more become another, that is, any now existing. Then one branch of a tree can become another. A species can in time, if subject to the proper conditions, split into varieties which, if developed far enough, may become distinct species. But no one of these species can be said to have been evolved from a contemporary species. For all have been changed, and the stock from which they came has ceased to exist as such. Each of the existing species would have a distinct name, such as, for instance, cow, bison, Cape buffalo, yak. Now suppose the fossil remains of the common ancestor of the above-named species were found. What should it be called? Cow, bison, Cape buffalo, or yak? It would be neither, for it would probably differ as much or more from them as they differ among themselves. Thus is laid to rest the idea that evolution is a theory that man was evolved from, or by way of, the monkey, or page turning, or the ape. They are as distinct species as is man himself. Geological evidence of progressive development. All life on this globe is divided into two great classes, vegetable and animal. All animals belong to one or the other of two grand divisions, invertebrates, those with backbones, and vertebrates, those without backbones. Invertebrates, those without backbones, and vertebrates, those with backbones. The later class, comprised more than 30,000 known species, is subdivided into 5 great groups: fishes, frogs, reptiles, birds, and mammals. At the top of the highest group, mammals, those which bring forth their young alive, is man. Birds and mammals were evolved from the reptiles, both offshoots of the same stock, and are contemporaneous in development and descent. The various classes and groups of animals, both in the order of development from the simple to the complex, and in the time of their arrival, are in the order named. First, the small one-celled animals, many species of which are found today. Then more complex organisms of the invertebrate division. Later, the fishes, amphibians, reptiles, and mammals, including man. The story told by the geologist is in perfect agreement with those laws of development which we call evolution. The lowest, simplest forms of life are the oldest, as is shown by their fossil remains, bones and shells, etc., found in stratified or water-laid rock. These fossils were deposited in sediment as it formed in sea and lake thousands and millions of years ago. In the moments of the earth's crust and sediment of ancient sea and lake bottoms was raised above the water and became land, the sediment hardened into rock. All sediment is formed on a level, but in its upheaval, generally slow, sometimes violent. It is often tilted at various angles, exposing its edges. It is from this outcropping, stratified rock, the sun of which is often several miles in depth, that forms the outer part of the earth's crust, that geologists read the story of creation. The oldest or lowest water-laid rock is the Archaean, in which there are no fossils. Above this is the stratum formed in a later period, are found evidences of the beginnings of life. After millions of years of growth and development, the shellfish, at the top of the invertebrate group, is produced. Then comes a period of uncounted millions of years in which the fishes, the lowest of the vertebrates, are being developed. Millions of years to bridge the chasm between the two main divisions of the animal kingdom. Millions of years to produce a backbone. Other long periods of time filled with change and development come and go. The age of the coal plant and of the frogs, succeeded by the age of reptiles and giant monsters, cold-blooded and of small brain, swarming sea and land. Long ages pass. The reptilian monsters have become extinct, leaving as their representatives only a few dwarfed species: the crocodile, the lizard, the snake, the turtle. Of mammals, the lowest orders arrive first, followed by the more highly developed, until finally man appears. Page turning can be difficult. Pardon me. One more. Alright, I think we got it. Naturally, fossils of land animals are few compared with those of marine animals. Practically all the remains of the latter sank and were covered with a slowly accumulating sediment, while the bones of the former only rarely were swept out to sea and lake. Rarest of all fossils are those of man. A few have been found antedating history by several thousand years, but we get a far more complete knowledge of our primitive ancestors from the tools and weapons that they left in sediment and drift before the dawn of the present era. We can trace his progress upward through all degrees of culture, from the rude old Stone Age of 100,000 years ago, through the new Stone Age, the Copper and Bronze Age, the Iron Age, to the beginning of written words. Yet, so old is our planet, and so long ago since life dawned on it, so long even since the first mammals appeared, that man's arrival, 100 or so thousand years ago, is but as yesterday. To paraphrase an illustration by Slade and Ferguson, suppose we take the Earth as 365 million years old, and consider this period as a year, 1 million years being taken as a day. Then, on this scale, the vertebrates came into existence late in the summer or early fall. The mammals, not earlier than the end of November, and the whole period of man is not likely to have been further back than the evening of December 31st. And the earliest historic evidence in Egypt is not more than 10 minutes before the last minute, the last midnight, of course, being the present. Chapter 2. Evidences of Evolution. Of the many evidences of the kinship of all animals, including man, only a few can be mentioned in this book. All animals, man included, are constructed on the same general plan. They have the same organs: brain, heart, lungs, digestive tract, nerves, skin, performing the same functions for the same purposes. The skeleton of man can be compared bone for bone with that of a monkey, bat, or seal. The bat's membranous wing is ribbed with the bones corresponding to the bones of a monkey's or a man's hand. The wing of both the bat and the bird has one bone from the shoulder to the first joint, and two bones from the first to the second joint, like the foreleg of quadrupeds and the arm of man, thus proving that the foreleg, the arm, and the wing are only modifications of the same limb. The bipped bird and the bipped man are modified quadrupeds. All the 500 muscles of the human body correspond with the muscles of other mammals. Even the brain, wherein man differs most from the lower animals, has the same chief fissures and folds in both man and the animal nearest man, the orangutan. Man and the other animals have the same 5 senses and the same sense organs. They, in common, have the same basic emotions such as surprise, jealousy, pride, hatred, shame, anger, grief, affection, and a sense of the ludicrous. Bucks says, so far is man's so-called human mind rooted in the sense of the instincts of all his ancestral species, and not only. Let me see. Make sure I got just one page. Yep. Dropped the book, so that doesn't help at all. Good thing I checked for page. We're turning to page 10, so Okay, here we go. So not, okay, missing a bit of the top of this sentence. So, but these senses and instincts still live in himself, making up indeed far the larger part of his current everyday life, while his higher physical life is merely the outgrowth and overflow of them. The old formula was, man is governed by reason, brutes by instinct. But science has proved that lower animals are not guided altogether by instinct. Many of their actions are the results of mental activities remarkably similar to reasoning. On the other hand, man himself has instinct, and well for him that he has, for his reason as yet is only partially developed. If we will but subtract from the sum of man's actions, not only those prompted by instinct, but those also that result from habit, custom, prejudice, and the emotions of anger, revenge, and vanity, and other elemental passions, we will not feel like crying from the housetops that man is governed by reason. Man and the lower animals have similar diseases. He is liable to contract from or communicate to them such diseases as glanders, hydrophobia, cholera, tuberculosis. Drugs, tobacco, and alcohol have the same effects on animals as on us. Of course, the dog, the ape, the horse, and man do not perfectly agree in their corresponding parts and in their natures. If they did, they would belong to the same species. But their similarities are so remarkable that they have a profound meaning for the thoughtful, however meaningless they may be to the thoughtless and the prejudiced. In embryonic development are found evidences not only of man's close relationship with all animals, but of the long, long route he and they have traveled in their common descent from the similar forms of life. Darwin says that the whole process of reproduction, from the first act of courtship by the male to the birth and nurturing of the young, is very much the same in all mammals. The lowest forms of animal life, the one-celled animals, are without sex, and multiply by dividing into half, each half developing into a complete cell, which in turn is subjected to the same dividing process. Many species of these lowly organisms still exist, never having developed further than the unicellular stage. All higher forms as of fishes, reptiles, birds, and mammals begin life at this point, as a simple cell. The cell, germ, or ovum of an embryo, the young of a mammal before birth, when fertilized, divides, forming two cells. The two divide into four, the four into eight, and so on, until there is a colony of similar cells amassed, and with a little rod of tissue, the beginnings of the spinal column, running through the embryo. At this stage is passing beyond the lowest grand division, the invertebrates. Entering the vertebrate division, the embryo passes into the fish group. Deep grooves, grill slits, appear on the sides of the neck of the embryo, and 6 pairs of arched branches of arteries arise, just as in fish, as if to give blood to the gills. Later, all but one of these pairs disappear. The arms and legs of the child, like the legs of all other embryos, begin to develop, and continue to do so for some time on the same plane as the fins of fishes. Further along in its development, the embryo amasses all the characteristics of the quadruped, even in the tail, which in the human embryo at this stage is longer than its body. During the 6th month, the entire body of the human fetus, except the palms and soles, is covered with fine woolly hair. Thus far, the human embryo has developed in the same way, has undergone the same changes, has passed through precisely the same stages as the embryo of other animals. In its further development, it leaves them all behind, except those nearest man. Its tail disappears, and it now has an opposable or thumb-like great toe, which, with the monkey and the ape, is a permanent characteristic. It is only in the latest stages of development that the human embryo presents marked differences from the embryonic ape. Of the fact that the embryo in its development from a single fertilized cell passes through all the stages representative of the principal animal divisions and in a progressive order from the simple to the complex and highly developed, there is no explanation but that of hereditary and descent of the higher animals from the lower, with heredity transmitting the records of the remote ancestral stages. Each stage, as of the fish, the quadruped, the ape, is a sign board along the route of man's descent. The 9 months embryonic period of each of us is an epitome of the history of the race down to the human period. Nor do the evidence of race history, as revealed by the child, cease with its birth. The babe is nearer the lower mammals than is the adult man. When it acquires the use of its limbs, it begins life as the quadruped. Its blundering attempts in learning to stand erect and walk is evidence of the fact that man's peculiar mode of locomotion is a late achievement. Like the lower animals, the babe makes known its wants by means of natural language. It later acquires artificial or spoken language in the same slow, laborious way that it was acquired by the race. At the average age of 3 years, the child has become self-conscious. His mind has passed the mental stage of all animals below man. Physically, he has become man. No, I think that's psychically. Yeah, psychically he has become man. In certain periods of youth, the child is a tree climber, a cave digger. Childish sports that hark back to periods passed through hundreds of thousands of years ago in the childhood of the race. At a certain stage, his emotional nature has developed to the point that he is conscious of wrongdoing. This is what the old theologians call the age of accountability. If there is a grain of truth in the chaff heap of Mosaic mythology, the fall of Adam indicates the point in the development of the race when conscience had dawned and feelings of remorse had begun to stir within. Man had reached the age of accountability, but prior to the fall, there was a rise. Rudiments or vestiges are also evidences of the descent or ascent of the higher forms of life from the lower. Rudiments are incomplete parts of the body, which have become arrested in their development, and which are now of no use, nor would now be of use if fully developed. They are relics handed down to us by the turning of pages. No. By the laws of heredity from a long past age when they were well developed and useful to our lower ancestors. Though we outgrow primitive conditions and stages of development, we cannot get rid of the past, but must drag it around with us as the snail drags its shell. All the higher animals bear within their bodies the reminders of a humble origin, some of which are the incisor teeth of certain grass-eating animals, so rudimentary as never to cut through, the small hoof points of the cow, which do not touch the ground, and the rudimentary fifth and sixth teats on the hinder parts of her udder. The splint bones in the horse's legs, vestiges of toes when he was a... Boy, the printing's going bad. Bones in which the horse's leg, vestiges of toes when he was a antelope. I'm not sure, a more-toed animal. The scanty downy hair that covers the human body. Some of the printing's gone. Certain muscles by which animals can twitch the skin are inherited by some persons who can move the scalp and the ears. The sense of smell in civilized man has become almost rudimentary. The veriform appendix is not only useless, but often injurious. It points back to the time when our ancestors were strict vegetarians, grass-eaters, in the Os-Cacoics. Man carries about with him the rudimentary bones of a tail. This, with the fact that the human embryo, at one stage, has a tail longer than its legs, is nature's everlasting reminder that proud man's remote ancestor was adorned with a tail. In order to get as clear an idea as possible of man's exact place in the animal scale, we should note the points wherein man differs from his nearest relatives, the orang, the gorilla, the chimpanzee, the gibbon, as well as the points wherein he agrees with them. Here are the most obvious points of dissimilarity. Man walks erect, though in his first year he goes on all fours, while apes only occasionally walk, and that in a semi-erect position, their arms longer than their legs, reaching the ground, knuckles touching. The nose of the ape is small, undeveloped. The canine teeth are very large. The mouth projects, and there is no chin. The entire body, except the palms and soles, are covered with hair. The brain capacity of the ape is less than half that of man. On the other hand, there are more points of similarity than of dissimilarity between man and the apes, and if the points wherein they differ be examined, they will be found to be differences in degree rather than in kind. The higher apes are entirely without tails. The embryo of the ape, like the human fetus, loses its tail sometime before birth. The young ape, monkey also, is born in almost as helpless a condition as is the human baby. The female ape has 2 mammary glands, udders, and they are always on the chest. Adult apes have the same teeth as man, 32 in number, incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. They have the same 200 bones and same 500 muscles, the same organs and glands. On their toes and fingers they have flat nails, like man, instead of claws. On account of the ape's opposable great toe, they were formerly classed as 4-handed, but this was an error. In all essential respects, their legs terminate in feet. Turning the page. Make sure I got the right one. Like man, they are bipeds, and like man, they have 2 hands. The brain of the ape, though much smaller than man's, as we would expect it to be, is constructed of the same general plan as his, with the same main fissures and the same groups of cells. There is no missing link in the plan and structure of man's brain, whatever difference they may be between his and the ape's in capacity. No scientist has ever been so foolish as to say that man and the apes belong in the same species. There are 4 species of the higher apes, and 1 of man, though the one species of man is divided into 5 varieties called races. Varieties differ less widely than species. Individuals within a variety also differ. Differences are no bar to unity if they are nullified and outweighed by similarities. Finally, let us keep in mind that while man has departed from the ancestral type, developing in one direction, the ape has gone off in another, and have acquired characteristics particularly their own. Resemblance in a babe and a young ape is far greater than in a man and an adult ape. The same is true of the young of all allied species. This divergence from birth of the adults of different species is strong evidence of a common origin. These are only a few of the hundreds of evidences proving that man fits into the same creative scheme with the lower animals, proving that he, in common with them, has developed from still lower forms, and that as a product of the creative forces of nature, he is wholly subject to her laws. And I think we'll stop there with part 1 of Little Blue Book number 467, Evolution Made Plain, written by John Mason. And I'll see you in part 2.